guys, I'm D-Mac from NBA Fantasy Bible, and along with me is Kayla Fonte, and together we are Between Two Hoops. Kayla, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Doing really well. Such a busy week. It's been a
hmm
massive week in the NBA once again. A lot to talk about. We have entered playoff zone, so a lot of guys and girls, for that matter, have entered the playoffs, and it's really exciting. For those that didn't make playoffs, stick with us. There's still a lot of content to get through, and I guess when we do go into the off season, which is a few weeks away, I guess there's still going to be a lot more content pumped out. But in the meantime, for those that are in the playoffs, stick with us because we're going to take you through to that championship. So, shall we get into it, Kayla?
Let's do it.
All right. You know the story, guys. So, here's our prezzo. This week, we're going to switch it up. Just because there is such a plethora of injuries, we're going to start with the injury updates first. And this would be a nice segue when we get into our adds and drops as well. Starting with the shorter term injuries. So this is something to pay close attention to because this week and next week, and whilst we're in the playoff mode, or if you're still battling to get into the playoffs, we're really looking for these guys that are going to be missing 1 or 2 games and looking for those injury replacements. Likewise, for the guys that are on your team that are going to miss a game or perhaps even longer, even if they are a high draft pick or have been really valuable for you this season, this may be time to cut bait. So let's go through and hopefully some of these will be applicable to your teams. But we'll start with those that are tagged with questionable tags. So starting off with Donovan Mitchell, missed the last few games. He's been out with a knee bone bruise, but he is questionable. I believe he's officially questionable, but according to the original timeline, he is also questionable for the next game. Any thoughts on Donovan Mitchell's return? Who does that impact, Kayla?
I think the main guys would be Karis LeVert, Okoro, guys like that. They've been really good to stream so far, but once he returns, it's going to impact all their values and they could probably be dropped.
Yeah, I think their drops, it does impact Darius Garland. He, of course, is not a drop, but yeah, his value will definitely diminish. We still have Evan Mobley out with an ankle sprain, so he's out for 2 more weeks. So there is some usage to be picked up. So there's availability for some of those lesser likes to still be streamed. But again, we'll go through our streamers later on. OG Anunoby, so he's back. He's been off for quite some time, several weeks now with his elbow bone spur. Questionable for the next game, which is great news.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this impacts Precious Achua, Bojan, who we're going to talk about later as a drop. It's going to be really interesting, especially we still have Randall still out, but with the return of one star.
Yeah, absolutely. And another one to look out for, and again, we'll speak about this, is Josh Hart. But yeah, watch this space. Tyler Hero is another one that could return in the next game. He's been out with a foot injury for the last couple of games. We've had some nice streaming opportunities. Duncan Robinson, Jaime Jaquez, to a lesser extent, Caleb Martin. But Tyler Hero is questionable for the next game.
That's good news for me too, because I have Hero on my team. But
yeah, and hopefully
and
I'm hoping that he will be your hero come playoff time. But
I love that.
A little bit of cheese on that pizza. All right, next one, Chris Middleton. He's been out for a while as well, but he's set to return very shortly.
Yeah, this will be interesting to see too. I just want to see how long he could stay on the court for. That's my main concern. I feel like over the past few years, the injuries have just really piled up for him.
Yeah, and we saw him start the season with a real hard limits restriction. Then he ramped up beautifully, and it was looking like he was almost the Chris Middleton of old, but then he got injured again. Let's see if he needs to ramp up his time. We have had opportunities for guys to stream, but again, Milwaukee's quite boring in terms of fantasy value, so not a lot to see here. So we can just move on to the Jalen's. We've got 3 Jalen's in a row, but we'll start with J-Dub of OKC. Ankle sprain. It looked really bad when I watched it live, but he's actually questionable for the next game.
Yeah, it's definitely good news. I wouldn't be surprised if he sits out a couple. But if he returns, something to watch out for.
Yeah, if he does miss, I guess Lou Dort does get a bit of a bump. Cason Wallace as well. And even look for Josh Giddey's have actually been in fine form recently. To a lesser extent, Gordon Hayward could be a deeper league option. But let's just see what he's deemed with come the next game. But another Jalen, one of our favorites, one of our prime candidates as a breakout star, Jalen Johnson. It has happened this season, but he has been out for the last couple. It's good timing for the Hawks. They are in play-in contention. I don't think they're really vying to go deep into the play-ins with, I guess, Trae Young also sidelined. Sadiq Bey out for the season now. Jalen Johnson should come back in, whether that's the next game, which is on Wednesday, or the following game. It should be very, very soon.
Yeah, and I think it's very promising that he's listed as questionable, because I know I was getting a lot of questions. Should we drop Jalen Johnson? And he was considered day-to-day, which is really good news. And I think even when he returns, he'll still play a pretty big role considering all the injuries that the Hawks have.
Yeah, I think he'll get a ton of usage while Trae Young is still sidelined. And Trae Young, and we'll talk about it on the next slide, but Trae Young's still out for a good 2 to 3 more weeks. So Jalen Johnson gets that boost. Of course, DeJounte Murray's going crazy at the moment. But moving on to the next Jalen Suggs. So he's missed at least one game, possibly even 2 with a thigh contusion. He's now questionable.
Yeah, something to monitor too. He's been pretty decent over the past few weeks. But as we all know, with the Magic's backcourt, we kind of have to watch because they're all pretty inconsistent at times, and that's because there's an overabundance of guards.
Yeah, inconsistent, banged up as well. Markel Fultz missed a game. So they were pretty much playing point forwards with Franz and with Paolo Banchero playing pretty much those distributors and facilitators for the Magic, but it's still working for them. They're playing really well. Next one that is questionable is Rudy Gobert. Minnesota have a pretty terrible schedule this week, but of course you still hold Gobert, but it does make it really tough and tough to get the W this week if he does happen to miss tomorrow's game.
Yeah, if he does miss, though, that just means more usage for Naz Reid. He's already rostered in the majority of leagues, but if you can find him, he's definitely worth a stream. Well, even an ad now with Cat out.
Yeah, and we spoke about it earlier during the week via Twitter, but Naz Reid was always the preferred option over Kyle Anderson. Anderson, I think, is maybe worth a stream come next week. Definitely not this week, just with a 2-game week this week. They have 4 games next week, so it's something to consider going into next week whilst Cat is sidelined. Now, getting into the day-to-days, Emmanuel quickly missed the last, and quite a few injuries for Toronto. That's just piling up. They're not playing for much this season, but Emmanuel Quickly and Gary Trent both missed yesterday's game.
But it opens up a lot of opportunities for Grady Dick, who's someone we've had our eye on for a while now.
Absolutely. But both of those guys are day-to-day. And in fact, I think, obviously, Emmanuel Quickly is rostered, but I think Gary Trent is close to being roster-worthy, even in a standard category or a points league for that matter. But we can discuss that shortly. Cam Johnson from the Nets, he's day-to-day with his ankle sprain. Does that do anything for the Nets?
I don't think it really does much. I still like to monitor. A lot of Nets have been fluctuating with their production every week, and we've spoken about this early in the season where it's hard to stream Nets. I just kind of want to monitor and see. Finney Smith is someone who I have my eye on, though. Yeah,
and Finney Smith was a really nice streamer at the end of last week. He sort of dropped off, as you would expect. Cam Thomas has come back into the lineup as well. Dennis Schroeder still has value as well. Cam Whitmore, which is disappointing, but he's also out with a knee sprain. He'll miss the next game. But it was looking like he would get a bump in time or playing time and usage as well with Alperen Sengun out.
But it's better news for Amen Thompson, though.
Great news for Amen. I think he's a must roster at this stage. But also look for Cam. If he does come back later in the week, he could be a really nice streaming option. Jaren Jackson Jr. is likely to miss. I think he has been ruled out for tomorrow's game. I'm pretty sure he has been ruled out.
So.
Again, just the Grizzlies suffering from a whole heap of injuries. Whether or not this one is legit, again, they just don't really need to play JJJ at this stage. So it's no great surprise. He's actually played more than I thought he would down the stretch, but this could just be the onset of a little bit more tanking, a little bit more of the obvious or maybe not so obvious shutdown.
Yeah, I think this is just the beginning of it. Like you mentioned, there's no reason for them to be playing their stars right now and risking injuries and things like that. So we could expect a lot more of this for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and again, we'll talk about this shortly with our ads and drops, but Jake LaRavia has been playing a little bit more. Santi Aldama is also worthy of a streaming spot as well, but we'll get into that shortly. Vince Williams missed, we'll be missing tomorrow's game. They are having a back-to-back, so we'll see that if he can return to the lineup, because he's been one that's been fairly consistent in recent times.
Yeah, out of all of the Grizzlies so far, besides the main stars, Vince Williams has been the number one ad for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives you everything across the board. He's been a little bit inefficient in terms of his shooting. His turnovers have been pretty bad as well. But in terms of overall value, I think he's, like you said, the number one person, apart from JJJ, but someone that you can rely on down the stretch. Larry Markkinen, I've got him pictured here just because he's going to be missing a couple of games at a minimum, and I've got a question mark. He should return in less than a week, but again, Utah aren't really playing for much at the moment. They probably could vie for a play-in spot, but I don't think they have the impetus or really the need to do so. So they're going to sit him longer term. What do you think, Kayla?
Yeah, I totally agree with that too. And this is a concern that a lot of people had a few weeks ago too, and we're starting to see it now. I don't think there's any point in them trying to fight for a play-in spot. We all know they wouldn't get very far anyway. So it would just make sense if they keep resting Markkinen and taking care of him.
Yeah, I agree there. Marvin Bagley. So on our list last week, he was actually on our holds list. Yes, he was injured, but we had that thought that there could be some value if he does return a little bit early. Now, this could be dependent on whether or not you have a free IR slot. But if he's back in about a week's time, he could give you some value next week. Mm-hmm. Having said that, if you're vying to get the W this week and move on to the next round of the playoffs or get into the playoffs in the first place, Marvin Bagley is not necessarily a must roster guy.
Yeah, I think he's also someone that you could drop and you wouldn't really have to worry about someone picking him up off the waivers right away. So even if you wanted to drop him and then pick him up later on, you could probably do that.
Yep, agreed. Julius Randle getting closer and closer. I think another couple of weeks away with his dislocated shoulder. But again, there's going to be that flow-on effect. We spoke about guys having lesser usage, guys like Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Precious Achiuwa. It probably even impacts guys that are slowly ramping up like Isaiah Hartenstein as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to have just so many impacts and it's going to be interesting to see. But so far there have been a few clear-cut drops. But for now, it's more of a monitoring situation when he returns because he also has to ramp up a little bit too.
Yeah, he has to ramp up. He does have that value in points leagues. He's actually a really great player in points leagues, less so in category leagues. So if you, again, don't have that free IR slot, and you've probably done this already, but if you don't have that free IR slot and you are trying to get through to the next round, Julius Randle can be cut, particularly in category leagues. Next one is Malcolm Brogdon. He's always on this list, and not sure why I put him back on, but just something to monitor. He could have a timeline of around a fortnight. However, having said that, Portland are in that position where they don't need to play him. He's a veteran. Do they actually need to play him? We're seeing a lot more Delano Banton, Scoot Henderson's return to the starting lineup. Do we actually need to see guys like Brogdon? Jeremy Grant has returned, but again, he's probably going to be shut down. I think Malcolm Brogdon is in the same boat.
Yeah, I think so too. And you could even argue that Aiden would be in that boat too.
Absolutely.
But it's good for other guys. Jabari Walker, Scoot Henderson, names to watch out for, even Duop Reith.
Yeah, and I think Duop Reith has heavily dropped just because Ayton has returned to the lineup. Jabari Walker has also missed the last couple of games, so he is probably going to be available on your waiver wire. So just keep an eye out for any updates on him because I think he's going to provide a lot of value down the stretch. Now, finally, Evan Mobley, in terms of our short-term injuries, Evan Mobley's around 2 weeks away with his ankle sprain. It did look a lot worse initially, but yeah, hopefully that 2-week timeline is about it. It does depend on your situation, whether you hold, whether you move on, whether you can just stash him away.
Yeah, I was going to say, too, that injury looked really bad. Like, I remember watching that, and I was like, there's no way that's only going to be a couple of weeks. But, I mean, he's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks, so this could stretch out longer than that.
Absolutely. And we've seen a few of those injuries recently, just in the last week or so, that have looked worse, but have been okay. Probably not in terms of fantasy, but you think of Alperen Şengün. He may only be out for a month, and we'll get to that shortly. Karl Anthony Towns, similar situation, looked worse initially, and we had, thoughts and prayers and all that sort of stuff all over Twitter. But it's turned out that maybe someone like a Karl Anthony Towns could return in time for the real-life playoffs. But we'll get onto that shortly. Let's move on to the longer-term injuries. LaMelo Ball, again, we just don't know the status. We hear that he's ramping up. He's continuing to improve his movement. His activities on court are ramping up. But is he actually going to play?
Yeah, I don't think he's been cleared. And from what I've heard, there's been a lot of concerns over re-injuring himself. So that's why he hasn't been cleared yet. I wouldn't be surprised if they just rule him out for the season at this point.
I agree. And a little bit lower on the list, but Mark Williams would be in the same boat. I think they just need to come out and just rule him out for the rest of the year and start afresh next year because I think they're two very important young guys for their franchise moving forward. D'Anthony Melton, again, this is a tough situation. I know people understand that he does have that fantasy value. But again, trade deadline, we saw a lot of additions to that 76ers squad. So even if he does return in 2 weeks, I don't think he's worth holding.
Yeah, I think he's definitely droppable. And it's also very concerning that he re-injured the same injury that kept him out for so long before. So that's mainly where the concern stems from.
Yeah, I think he's a drop as well.
Yeah.
Desmond Bain and Marcus Smart, same timelines. We've been watching this for quite some time. I just don't think they're coming back. 2 to 3 weeks is likely their timetable, but do they actually come back in 2 to 3 weeks? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I have Bain in one of my leagues, but I haven't dropped him yet just because I have him in the IL, and it's only because I have that space there. Like, I'm just keeping him just because I can.
Yeah, exactly right. Mitchell Robinson, he's been out for several weeks, but he could return in time for the real life playoffs. He may not help you, depending again when your playoff schedule is in fantasy. But 2 to 3 weeks, he's again going to be ramping up. So restricted minutes initially. Is he going to be of value? Definitely not in points, perhaps as a streamer in categories if your league actually runs that far. But 2 to 3 weeks, and again, he'll be missing back-to-backs. I just don't think he's worthy of a roster spot. I just wanted to put him there just to highlight that he could come back and eat into a little bit of time for Isaiah Hartenstein, who himself, as we mentioned, is just ramping up himself after injury. But keep an eye on that one. Trae Young, another one. I just don't think he's going to give you value in terms of your fantasy playoffs. 3 to 4 weeks from my estimate.
Yeah, I think he's a safe drop. They're not playing for anything either. So,
yeah. And as hard as it's going to be, I think Joel Embiid is in the same situation. I think he is a drop. If he does come back, he could be worth streaming, but for what cost? Maybe you could just get better value rather than hold Embiid. You could just get better value in streaming that slot.
Yeah, I feel like it's very uncertain too. We haven't heard of many updates surrounding everything that's going on, so that's not very promising.
Very promising. I think he'll be back in time for real life playoffs, which is great for the 76ers, but doesn't help your fantasy team. Russell Westbrook, clear drop, hand fracture. He was a clear drop even before the injury, but now with that hand fracture, it would keep him out of around a month. No need to hold there. Mark Williams, we spoke about, I think he's a clear drop. Karl Anthony Towns. So from this point on, I think all of these guys, particularly those that are out for the season, are clear drops, obviously, but all of these other guys that will have the 3 to 4 week timeline, not going to help you in fantasy. Of course, you hold them if you're in a dynasty or a keeper league situation, but no need to hold them in a redraft league.
Yeah, these are all clear-cut drops.
Yeah, so we've got Kat, Şengün, Ben Simmons, Yucca Purtle, Scotty Barnes. Geez, your poor Raptors, I've got to say. Sadiq Bey, that's another fresh injury. Tari Eason, which really hurt, and he was looking really promising at the start of the season, but he's just been out for several weeks, finally ruled him out for the season, which I think is a good thing for him. And recently, in the last couple of days, Benedict Mathurin, which we'll go into the flow-on effects there. I think definitely helps someone like Aaron Naismith. Not so much Andrew Nembhard, but Aaron Naismith. We'll get into that shortly. All right, ads, holds, and our watch list. So our ads for the week. Amen Thompson, we spoke about Alperen Şengün going down. Jock Landale is also on that list, but I just feel like Amen Thompson's going to get more of an opportunity than Jock will.
I think so too, but it also really depends on how this lineup shapes up. So if they end up going small ball, it's going to be Amen Thompson who's benefiting the most. And it also helps if Whitmore misses a couple games as well.
Absolutely. I think we've seen Jock Landale in a starting role for the Suns when DeAndre Ayton was out, was it probably a couple seasons ago, possibly even last season. He didn't light it up, but he also sharing those center minutes with Bismack Biyombo at the time. So perhaps he does, depending on the matchup as well, perhaps he does play close to 30 minutes. And if that's the case, he is an ad. But like you said, Amen Thompson is the preferred option here.
Yep.
DeAndre Ayton, Sadiq Bey is out. Jalen Johnson's questionable. I think DeAndre Ayton has to be added here.
Hunter.
Yeah, DeAndre Hunter has to be added.
Yeah, definitely Hunter. He's been a little bit underwhelming over the past few games too, but I mean, he has that opportunity there, so it makes sense to add him.
Yep, 100%. Trey Murphy, this is a no-brainer. We had him on our watch list a week and a half ago, but he is clearly a must-roster guy. He's just turned it around, and it's been awesome to see. Shooting lights out, so he's probably unsustainable, but he's still providing value across the board, so steals, rebounds, of course, his threes, and of course, points. So clear ad for me.
Yeah, same here, even in points leagues too. And this is the kind of production that a lot of people expected heading into the season, but we
Yeah,
haven't really seen until this point.
absolutely. TJ McConnell, he of course backs up Tyrese Halliburton, but he's had some really good value, and I think he's worthy of a 12-team spot.
I think so too. With McConnell, I think you have to stream him while he's hot and then
Yep.
drop when cold. So he had a really good game last game, but the game before that, not great numbers. But I mean, it's looked really promising so far. So I'd add him for now and then kind of monitor how everything goes.
Yeah, another of his teammates is Aaron Neesmith. With Benedict Mathurin going down, I think Neesmith is an ad now.
Yeah, and he was great last game too. He played, I think, about 37-ish minutes, which is really good. And he was kind of slow to ramp up from injury, but now that we've seen that production, definite ad.
Yeah, let's monitor that because also Andrew Nempard has been playing quite poorly recently and hasn't been getting those big minutes. So perhaps Aaron Neesmith is probably at his peak of his powers at the moment after that injury, but I still think he's worthy of a roster spot. Nempard is a drop. Bryce Sensabaugh, now he's looked really good, and with Larry Markkinen to be shelved at least for the next couple of games, I think Sensabaugh could be a nice addition to your team.
Yeah, I think so too. He's been really promising over the last few games, and I kind of want to see how that potential turns out, especially with Markkinen out.
Yeah, there's a lot of hype around him as a rookie earlier in the season, but it was more a let's watch this space just in case
Yeah.
Utah looked to shut things down. It's looking like it could be verging on that opportunity now. So, yeah, something to keep a mind on or keep your eyes on. He's looked really solid in the last couple. He started in the last game as well. So, yeah, he's playing today. Keep an eye on that one. So I think he could be a nice addition to your team. Dan Gafford. Now, he was on our drops list last week, along with his teammate, Derek Lively. They were splitting center minutes. It was hard to see them, or either of them, getting value when they were splitting the minutes. Yesterday, they both had great games, which is somewhat surprising. But of the two, again, we always said this, but of the two, Dan Gafford seems to have the higher upside.
Yeah, and I'm still a little bit hesitant on this, though, just because we've seen how bad they've been over the past few weeks. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but they both played minutes in the low 20s last game, which is why I'm like, that kind of production for that time. But I mean, if he's going to keep playing like this, he would be an ad for me, definitely over Lively.
Agreed there. I think, as we alluded to, I think Daniel Gafford has the value in a category league, particularly with those blocks, high field goal percentage, good rebounds, of course. But for points, maybe he's more of a streamer, but it's just another watch this space opportunity here. Dennis Schroeder, again, just some injuries to the Nets, but Schroeder's looked quite impressive recently.
Yeah, he's looked really good. I think, especially with Simmons out, that really just solidified his role for the rest of the season.
Yeah, agreed. And Simone Fontecchio finally on this ads list. He's looked good, but Asar Thompson missed the last game, and then I think he only played 11 minutes in the previous game due to illness. So keep an eye on this. But Simone Fontecchio, I think he's probably worthy of a roster spot at this stage.
I think if he's starting, he is worthy of a roster spot.
Yeah, but it may depend on what's going on with Asar Thompson as well.
Yeah.
Next one, Kelly Olynyk. If he hasn't been added, go and add him. We spoke about this last week with Jakob Poeltl going down. Scotty Barnes also out. Kelly Olynyk had a couple of quieter games. He had a really nice game yesterday.
He still has that potential for the rest of the season too. So it's a good long-term ad.
Agreed there. Paul Reed, particularly for category leagues, and I've been banging on about this for quite some time, but even coming off the bench, he had one game where he started. Mo Bamba started ahead of him. And then back to the bench as well. So Paul Reed, even off the bench, is still valuable, particularly in Cats.
I think he's been a little bit frustrating too, just because of how the minutes have shaken up and then him getting pushed to the bench. So a lot of people have grown frustrated with him. Yeah. But we can expect those occasional duds here and there, but he still has that long-term value. And he's still pretty decent in points leagues. He can probably give you about 25 to 30 fantasy points a night, kind of depending. But
yeah. But yeah, still a hold for me in Cats. And like you said, probably borderlining points leagues. Asar Thompson, just keep an eye on him. He is probably questionable for the next game, but I still think he's worthy of a roster spot if, in fact, he is cleared to play. Again, depending on your situation, if he's ruled out. And again, I don't think he will be ruled out. It's an illness. I think he'll recover by then. But if he is, perhaps you may need to drop. But for now, he would be on a holds list. Alex
Yeah.
Caruso had. Oh yeah, go on.
Sorry, quick
Sorry.
thing. I think it depends. Yeah, because like we have to see. I think he was dealing with asthma, so that's a little bit interesting there. But we'll just kind of have to see what happens. But I mean, if he's starting and he takes that role over Fontecchio, he's a definite hold for
Yeah.
me.
Asthma, yeah, JaVale McGee, shout out to him. But next one, Alex Caruso had an absolute stinker overnight, but he still has to be held. I think he's been close to a top 50 category league player in the last month. Looked tremendous. Obviously, he gives you those stocks, so steals and blocks. He's not going to give you a great deal of points. He's sometimes quite inefficient, but he'll provide those assists as well. But he is a solid hold for me.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Caruso. His stats aren't eye popping, but he gives you a little bit of everything, especially in the defensive categories.
Yeah. Hence why he's more valuable in category leagues, but again, will provide that value for points leagues. Dante DiVincenzo has to be held at this stage. Again, we spoke about Julius Randle returning shortly. That'll, of course, impact his usage. But I think Dante still needs to be held.
Yeah, I think so as well. Just like we've talked about before, with Randall returning in a couple weeks, he still has that value.
Yeah, and in a couple of weeks, perhaps your playoffs have already finished by then. So, yeah, he has to be held for now. Vasily Micic, no Trey Mann, no LaMelo Ball. He's playing point guard. He's a starting point guard. He has to be held for now. Having said that, next week, things may change with a 2-game week for the Hornets. Perhaps he's a drop candidate. But for now, for this week, he has to be held.
Yeah, as long as he has that opportunity and he has a solid schedule this week, hold on to them. He's getting those minutes. He's giving you good production. But like you said, next week is when, if there's only 2 games, you could probably get someone better.
Yeah, and the Hornets are also dealing with Cody Martin on the sidelines, Seth Curry on the sidelines. That was a name I couldn't remember last week. Seth Curry on the sidelines. But yeah, Vasily Micic still needs to be held for me. Nick Richards, again, we don't know what's going on with Mark Williams. So Nick Richards just, again, for this week has to be held. I think that's a no-brainer. And Grant Williams has some value in 12-teamers as well.
I think so too. The only issue is like just that inconsistency. But so far, he's looked really good, especially when you compare it to his time with the Mavericks.
Yeah, big time. Time with the Mavs, time with the Celtics as well. But hold for now. And like we said, when it comes to next week, if you make it that far, that's where you reassess and perhaps drop in anticipation for that week. Trey Jones, solid hold. I'm still getting some questions around Trey Jones, but for me, solid hold.
Yeah, I would say hold too. I've had a couple questions about it as well, where people have wanted to drop. Worst case, I would say you probably could, but like you said, I would prefer to hold on. But I mean, if you really need that win, I mean, drastic times, right?
Yeah, if you really want to stream it, he's starting point guard. He's playing 30-plus minutes for the Spurs.
Yeah.
I think he just has to be held for now. Buddy Hield, now this is borderline for me. And I know a few weeks ago when he got traded to the 76ers, he was a must-add player. They've also now had some guys come back from injury. It's lessened his usage. He's actually come off the bench in the last couple of games as well, but I still think he's a hold.
Yeah, I kind of still want to hold and see how everything shapes up. But Melton is out, so that only helps his value. It's really a question mark of how his usage goes going forward, and does he come off the bench? Does he start?
Yeah. And again, when it comes to category leagues, it may depend on your team construction. If you don't need the threes, you don't need the points, move on, stream that slot. If you're in dire need of those stats, then again, he's a consideration. Finally, Jaden Ivey, inconsistent. And again, Cade Cunningham's just been dominant as of recent times, but Jaden Ivey, I think, is still a hold.
I think so too. Yeah, he's played better over the past few games compared to before. But like you said, it's just those inconsistency issues. But I would still hold just to see how his value turns out for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and he hurts you in places in category leagues, as we know, can be quite inefficient at times with his shooting percentages particularly. But in points, I think he's a clear must roster player. And just some watch lists and potential streams. Rashawn Holmes, we spoke about Marvin Bagley going down, out for probably another week. Rashawn Holmes missed the last game, but if he does happen to start the next game, I think he's a nice stream.
Yeah, I think so too, especially if he's getting that role, those minutes. Good stream.
Yeah, Corey Kispert started the last game for the Wizards in Holmes' absence, and he looked really impressive as well. So he's also on this list a little bit further down. But again, it depends on whether or not Holmes is available or if they decide to go small ball and play small ball center with Kyle Kuzma there. So again, a few variables there. Watch this space. Gary Trent Jr., we spoke about him earlier. He missed yesterday's game, but I still think he's someone that can be streamed in. He's going to provide some really nice value. A lot of their guys in Toronto are out, so they need that spark.
Yeah, there's just been a lot of injuries for the Raptors right now. But over the past few weeks too, he's looked a lot better than he has earlier in the season, which makes him a solid stream.
Yep. Again, we spoke about JJJ, but Santiago Dama, I think, is someone worthy of a stream, so keep an eye on him. His teammate, Jordan Goodwin, I've got question marks next to him just because two-way player, again, we don't know if he's going to be playing night to night. So if you see that he's going to be starting, I think he's worthy of a stream. If you don't see his name on that starters list, I would avoid at all costs, avoid Jordan Goodwin. As much as we like his stat set and the potential value, I think there's just too much risk, particularly if you do have limited transactions available in any 1 week. So just keep an eye on that one. Just be very mindful of that. Jake LaRavia, we mentioned as well. He's looked quite good, but in the last game, he only played, I think, 26 minutes as well. So, yeah, it's just a little bit up and down for my liking. So, again, he's on the watch list.
It's been really hard streaming guys from the Grizzlies, and we talk about this every single week, but the most important thing you could do is just keep checking that injury report, see who's playing, and then make moves accordingly.
Yes, so keep an eye on Twitter, and like Kayla has mentioned, just make those moves accordingly. I think GG Jackson's in a similar boat as well.
Agreed.
Trey Mann has missed the last couple, which has opened up the door for Vasily Micic a lot more. Vasily Micic was still starting alongside of him as well. But Trey Mann, just keep an eye on it, because if he does return with LaMelo probably sidelined for the rest of the season, I would suspect, I think Trey Mann still has some value there.
I think so too, especially if he's going to be starting for the Hornets. Like you said, LaMelo Ball probably isn't returning. Even if by some miracle that he does, I mean, what kind of role would he have? It would be very limited and insignificant. Correct.
Corey Kispert, we mentioned with Richaun Holmes, so we'll move on there. Grady Dick, you mentioned earlier, just with the plethora of guys out for Toronto, he did look really nice in the last game.
Yep, he did.
And finally, Derek Lively, to go along with our Dan Gafford discussion earlier, just someone to keep an eye on. He's still playing the low 20s in terms of minutes. So probably not a must roster guy, even in category leagues if you need those blocks. Probably a little bit too inconsistent for my liking. Someone to still monitor.
Yeah, like he had a big game last night, but that was in 20 minutes. And I just think that was a bit of an outlier.
I agree. I think the risk is too big to make him a must roster guy.
Yeah.
Now, looking at our drops and our droops. So firstly, our drops, the guys that do have those long-term injuries. So we spoke about it, but guys like Alperen Şengün, Karl Anthony Towns, Scotty Barnes, and the like, they're all listed there. But in our opinion, you don't need to hold on to them. Of course, it depends on when your playoffs are. But if they are standard, if they are this week, or even if they're next week, I don't think these guys are going to help you.
I think so too, especially for, like, if you look at someone like Scotty Barnes, I think his return date is in early April. But the Raptors aren't playing for anything. So even if he were to return, just like with LaMelo Ball, it's going to be a very limited and insignificant role, and it's not really going to help your team that much.
Yeah, and you look at some of those names there, a lot of superstars on that list. So if you're not in contention, maybe with the exception of Embiid, but if you're not in contention, of course, Kat, not in contention for the playoffs, then why risk someone like Scotty Barnes, Mark Williams, LaMelo Ball? It's just not worth it, to be honest. Next drop, Delano Banton. So he had some fantastic value earlier in the week and even at the end of last week, putting up some fantastic numbers. But he has since returned to the bench, and Jeremy Grant also returned to the Trailblazers lineup.
I think he played low 20s last game. But yeah, with Scoot back, people returning from injuries, it really limits his value.
They did have one game where Scoot did start on the bench and Banton still started. Banton still put up a fantastic line, which was surprising to me. But since Jeremy Grant then came back yesterday, like you said, low 20 minutes. So he has to be dropped right now. If we hear that Jeremy Grant does miss more time and perhaps Scoot Henderson, they're going to cotton ball him and really look after him, perhaps Banton could be a stream later on. But for now, he's a drop. Speaking of drop, Duop Reith, his Trailblazers teammate, is a drop now that DeAndre Ayton has returned to the lineup.
But he could have more opportunities down the stretch if there's a potential shutdown.
Yep, which is probably very likely.
Yep.
Royce O'Neal, he's a drop in my opinion. Devin Booker's returned. Yes, Eric Gordon is still on the sidelines, but you still have the big three that are there. So there's not a great opportunity or a great deal of opportunity for Royce O'Neal to really show out. Still playing solid minutes, which is good to see. So again, it's someone you could consider as a stream, but in my opinion, he's just not worthy of a roster spot.
Yeah, I agree with you there too. And I think he's more of a streamer when one of the big three misses time.
Correct, yeah. Malachi Branham was putting up some sensational numbers, and I said it on Twitter. Some of those shooting stats were very unsustainable. We've seen it earlier in the season. He just wasn't that guy. He had a disappointing game overnight. Devin Vassell back in the lineup as well, so I don't think Malachi Branham needs to be held.
Yeah, I think it's a safe drop too. Someone you can keep an eye on as a streamer, though.
Yep. Marvin Bagley, we alluded to this earlier with our discussions about him during the injury segment, but I don't think he has to be held for now. But keep an eye on him. Perhaps he'll give you some value next week if he does return. Andre Drummond, he was looking really good as Nikola Vucevic's backup, sometimes playing alongside of each other and putting up some outstanding rebound numbers, but he's dropped off in the last 5 games, played less than 20 minutes in each one of those 5 games.
Yeah, it's just the minutes that's the issue. He'll give you some good value when he's starting alongside Vucevic, but do you really want to hold on for him for a lot of bad games just to get that one good one?
Correct.
Probably just stream him for that.
Correct. Stream that slot, really maximize the value there. And if you do happen to come across a schedule that looks good, there's some twin towers in the opposing team's front court, perhaps then you'd consider Andre Drummond if you're desperate again for rebounds. Zach Collins, he had some good value while Wemby was out for a couple of games, but since then he's returned to the bench.
Yeah, when he's in that bench role, his upside is very limited.
Yep. The next two are no-brainers. I think they're just boring. Harrison Barnes and Kevin Huerter, I think they just need to be dropped. Huerter probably has a little bit more value, but as of recent times, just hasn't been putting up those the playing time, nor the usage, nor the value.
Yeah, we always talk about this too, how they're very streaky players, so you have to add when hot and drop when cold.
Correct. Spencer Dinwiddie, I've just left him here from last week. He's still not providing that value.
Yeah, I think we can keep him here for the rest of the season.
I think so too. Gordon Hayward. Now, this one we spoke about a little bit earlier, just in relation to J-Dub. I think J-Dub returns soon, so Gordon Hayward probably doesn't have that value, but it's just something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of want to see what happens with the roster. We still have Giddey in the starting lineup, which is it makes sense for now. But yeah, I just kind of want to see how everything shakes up. But you don't have to hold on to him for that.
Yeah, Giddey's actually looked quite good in the last few games, which perhaps it's Gordon Hayward's presence. I'm not really sure, but he's looked a lot better. Gordon Hayward is not a must roster guy. Yep. Tim Hardaway has been very disappointing recently, and it sort of makes sense. It's just not that usage to go around with Luka and Kyrie just dominating right now.
Yeah, plus from the trade deadline too, they brought in a lot of front court depth, which really hurt his.
Yeah, well, PJ Washington's taking those shots as well. So, yeah, there's probably less need for Tim Hardaway to go out there and shoot lights out. Bojan Bogdanovic, again, this Knicks conversation around just the great depth that they've got now, but that definitely hurts the fantasy value of Bojan.
Oh, yeah, ever since moving to the Knicks, he's been just like a shell of himself, which has been really unfortunate because he was putting good value with the Pistons, but he's droppable now.
Yep, 100%. Andrew Nembhard, we spoke about him. He's a drop for me right now. And Caleb Martin, decent streamer from last week. Tyler Hero's now returning, as we said. So Caleb Martin, for me, is a clear drop.
Yeah, same here.
Going into our droops, for those that are not familiar with that term, droops are those guys that are trending towards a drop. So not necessarily a drop right now, but something to monitor. Isaiah Hartenstein still ramping up, and I'm not sure if he's ramping up fast enough for some people that are really critical in critical stages of their playoff situation. So Isaiah Hartenstein, for me, is a droop, not yet a drop, but it could depend on your situation.
Yeah, 100%. I would still hold him from now, but we really have to see how all the injuries play out with people returning. He could very well be heading towards a drop.
Yep. Josh Hart, we spoke about him earlier. Just with OG, it's going to be interesting. Who does OG impact the most? Is it going to be Josh Hart or the next guy on the list, Precious Achiuwa?
I think it's going to be most likely Precious, just because we know that Hart is a little bit of a better player than Achiuwa. but we really have to wait and see. It could impact both of them to a big extent where they have to be dropped.
Yeah, it could be down to Tom Thibodeau's mood for the day as well.
Yeah.
So depending on, I think he really likes Josh Hart, so he may actually get a little bit more of a run than Precious. But yeah, let's see what happens there. Jaime Jaquez and Duncan Robinson, similar to what we said with Caleb Martin. Tyler Hero's set to return probably the next game, so that will definitely impact Jaime and Duncan Robinson.
Yeah, there's just not going to be enough minutes to go around for that trio.
Yep, and Jimmy Butler's playing every game now, and he's looking really good. All right, let's go to our schedule. Kayla, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, for sure. So it's not as much of a busy week as we had last week. We still have a good chunk of teams. Over half of the league is playing 3 games. So those are some streamers to watch out for there. Probably not great streamers would be players from the Lakers or the Timberwolves, just because they only have 2 games this week. But we also have 12 teams who are playing 4 games, and they're all listed there. We won't go through them for the sake of time, but definitely some streaming opportunities there. And you can look at the list of players that we've mentioned and some drops who you could get rid of to open up some streaming spots.
Yeah, so someone like Kyle Anderson for the Minnesota Timberwolves doesn't have to be held right now, and he's just not putting up that value. So, yeah, definite drop in that situation. Now, moving on to back-to-backs, Kayla, obviously we've had our Monday matchup, but let's have a look. Anything interesting or anything that stands out for you?
Yeah, for me, probably Boston, just because we all know how Al Horford is with those back-to-backs. Probably going to sit out one of those games for sure. Let's see who else we got. We also have Miami too. That's Sunday, Monday, something to watch out for going into week 21. So there's some opportunities for bulk streams here. We also have the Pistons too. Have to watch out with obviously Asar Thompson. Simone Fontecchio would be someone who would be a good stream if he is sidelined. We also have to watch what happens with asthma.
Absolutely, yeah. Just with Boston, I would expect that they do rest some of their superstars as well. They're just cruising right now. So, yeah, someone like Derek White, obviously. Jaylen Brown, I think he'll probably rest tomorrow, to be honest. Jason Tatum, I think, will get a rest day at some stage as well. So don't be surprised. Obviously, Kristaps Porzingis gets rest days left, right, and center. But that's keeping him fresh for the real-life playoffs. Does hurt your fantasy team, unfortunately, but... yeah, they don't care about our teams. Moving to our mailbag section, we'll fly through these very quickly, but just love to get your opinion and your thoughts on these, Kayla. So, Aaron Acuna, would you recommend dropping Şengün now that we have the details of his injury? Season ends the 16th of April. Okay, that's quite late. Estimated return is the 2nd of April. Playoffs begin to start next week for my league. So he's got until next week. What are your thoughts there?
For me, he's still a drop. We've also mentioned this earlier in our drop segment, but the Rockets don't have anything to play for right now. They're going to want to rest him, keep him healthy for next season. They don't want to risk anything worse. And that's also just an estimated return date of early April. It's not a guarantee that he's going to come back. So I think he could safely be dropped.
Yeah, I agree with that. Next one from Fantasy Football Wiz. Is Delano Banton a drop since Scoot is back? So I think he may have actually asked this one before yesterday's game. So for me, definite drop.
Yeah, same here.
Let's keep an eye on what Scoot does for the rest of the season. But like we said, Delano Banton could have some value if guys like Jeremy Grant or if Scoot Henderson do sit. So just keep that name in mind because he has provided some really nice value when those guys have missed. Yes, but easy drop for now. Next one, Kayla. Trace Jackson Davis, Kispert, or Holmes. DraftKings scoring. I'm not sure what DraftKings scoring is. Maybe you have. It's probably a points league, points-based type of situation. But his semifinals start next week on the Monday. So Jackson Davis, Kispert, or Holmes.
See, this one kind of depends on what happens with Washington's injuries. Marvin Bagley, I believe you said, was out for about a week, probably maybe a little bit more. Holmes is also considered questionable. I would probably lean Kispert just because if they do go that small ball option, he'll probably be starting and he's been really promising in that role, but it also depends on when Holmes returns. So I would watch out for that and then stream accordingly. With TJD, he's been pretty solid so far. The only thing is the minutes are a little bit low and I don't know how reliable that production is over a long period of time.
Yep, I completely agree with your sentiments, Carla. Next one's from Ryan. So he's a big fan of ours, I think.
Mhm.
Aaron Neesmith or Santi Aldama in a points league. I think you may have actually already responded to Ryan.
Yeah, that one I did yesterday, but I would lean definitely Neesmith.
Neesmith in that
Yeah.
situation. Yeah, I think with Benedict Mathurin out, I think he's a really nice ad there. This one's from Kay. Kay from Jersey. Thoughts on keeping Drummond as a matchup streamer?
I would only stream him when I know that he's going to be starting or Vucevic is out.
Yep, agreed. And again, if it's going up against some big guys as well, he could get you some nice rebounds. So depending on your league format, I don't think he's a must roster, but yeah, an okay stream in some situations. Imla Shash, which two? Yeah, I haven't read this one properly, but which two would you add out of these guys for category leagues? Isaiah Stewart, Davis for Bertans, Malachi Branham, Chris Boucher. I think Chris Boucher, didn't put him on the injury list, but he's now out. So I think he can be crossed off this list.
Yes.
Or Simone Fontecchio. Planning to drop Hartenstein and Finney Smith. Which two would you add?
Well, yeah, Boucher definitely crossed off, but even when he was healthy, he didn't really have any fantasy relevance.
Although there was a couple of games, he was providing some upside there. We've seen in seasons past.
Like
One
he's
particular
very
season where he was, very risky.
Yeah,
but
that's why.
it's a non-event now. He is injured.
Yeah, I would probably lean Fontecchio. If Asar Thompson is out, I think he can give you some good value in multiple categories.
Yep.
Maybe Bertans too, I think. He's been really promising over the past few games. And he can give you those threes if that's what you really need.
Yeah, and it does come down to team construction. What do you need? Davis Bertans, the Latvian laser. Yeah, he had that season, I can't remember, 3 or 4 seasons ago where he was a top 50 guy unbelievably, got a massive bag, and then has done nothing since that. But I wouldn't disagree. I think Isaiah Stewart just is not very good. So if it's a 12-teamer and he doesn't say what it is here, but out of these guys, I'd probably lean definitely Simone Fontecchio and either Branham or Bertans there. But keep in mind, Bertans, Hornets, 2-game week next week. If he's only looking at games for this week, he's a possibility, but for next week, definitely not. Okay, that's our mailbag. Our next segment. So you may or may not understand or know that we have been part of a way too early industry mock draft. So this has been run by our friend Adam King at FBI. Quite a few analysts have been a part of this, and it's been going for probably the last couple of days. It's a slow draft, so we are in the midst of it. We're probably in the middle rounds at the moment. We're in round 6, I believe. Yes, round 6.
Yes, pick 9.
So, we are going to take you through some of these. We're not going to go through every single pick, but just perhaps, Kayla, we can go through and just highlight any things that stood out for you, and perhaps go through your picks as well.
Yeah. So the number one thing for me, what do you think about Wemby going first?
I like it. It's a bit risky. I think Jokic and SGA are safer, but Wemby is just so exciting, and the world's his oyster. So I don't hate that pick at all. And if I had taken that number 1 pick from Raf Johnson, I probably would have taken Wemby, just as a bit of almost like a show of confidence for Wendy and his future abilities as well. So I like that pick. I can't dispute it, but if you wanted to play it safe, Jokic and SGA. Probably Jokic before SGA, in my opinion.
Yeah. You know what? I like that pick too, but if it was me picking first, I probably would have gone Jokic. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, also, I won't say coming to the end of his career, but he's at that stage as a big man as well. He could deteriorate, and I'm not saying it's going to happen next season because look at him today. He's at the peak of his powers right now. And absolutely smashing it. If you happen to have Jokic in playoffs right now, you are smiling right now. But Jokic is a safe move for next season. But that upside with Wemby, my God. And in a dynasties format, not that this is dynasty, this is just a 14-team 9-cat situation for redraft. But wow, Wemby's, he's changing basketball as we know it. But I'm okay with that pick.
Yeah.
Now, Kayla, what about your pick? You went Joel Embiid.
That was the 5th pick. And we were talking about this earlier too. You even said if Embiid falls to 5, I mean, it's enticing.
I was looking at our messages just a while ago, and I said it's going to be Wemby, Jokic, SGA, those top 3. Probably Luka, and I said perhaps Luka falls to you. And it would be interesting to see if Embiid or Halliburton go to you, and what would you do? You have taken Embiid.
Yeah, you know what? I took a little bit of a chance. It was funny because I was watching parts of Kingy's episode, and he was like, "Oh, that's a little bit risky," and I was like, "It is," but I mean, his numbers are just so dominant. That's the thing, right? Like he'll
Yeah.
give you everything.
Yeah. That
So
per
I
game,
had to do it.
the per game value is, it's on point there. But I also see the hesitation from other people looking
Yeah.
at his injury history and him now injured at the moment. Even up to that point, he hadn't even played a lot of the season. So I can see the hesitation from some people, but then
Yeah.
I can see the value there that you've done.
Mhm.
I had picked 13. What a rough spot in a 14-teamer, but AD slid to me, which was great.
Mm.
There were a couple of interesting picks, but again, it's a mock. We don't take it too seriously,
Yeah.
and it's great for us. A lot of these analysts will discuss these in their own forums, and yeah, there's some interesting picks there. But AD slid to me at number 13, so I just had to snaffle him up.
Oh, you know what? I would have had the same pick if I was 13th. 100%.
Well, I think he's a top 4 per game guy this season. He's always going to have that injury risk, but he's actually been very healthy this year. And
Mm-hmm.
what's to say that doesn't continue next season?
Yeah, and you know what? It's really hard looking at injuries and trying to predict what's going to happen for next season.
Yeah,
So, yeah, you
exactly.
got to think about it, but you can't get too caught up in it. That's the thing. To
Completely
an
agree.
extent. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know, and I'm not going to poo-poo some of these picks, but for AD to slide to 13, if this was a real draft, oof, that's money for jam, my friends. But yeah, I was happy with that one. I may as well go through my next pick. I took Donovan Mitchell again. This was a nice one, but that's
Mm-hmm.
at pick 16. Now, he's been a clear first-round guy, easy top 10. I think he's closer to 7th ranked in 9cat. So for him to slide to 16th, he's still relatively young. I don't see him being that injury prone. Yes, he's missed a fair amount of games this season. He's now actually, side note, ineligible for NBA awards. I don't think he's going to be able to reach that
I heard
65
about
game
that.
threshold, which
Yeah.
is disappointing and somewhat surprising. But for next season, I think it's a great pick for him to slide to 16. If you can get him in the top 15, I think you're doing really well next season.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And it is surprising. What do you think about Barnes going in the first round?
Yeah, again, I think that's a bold statement move. But
Yeah.
Barnes in the first round, I can see the upside in
Mhm.
Dynasty, 100%. For next season, I'm not so sold, particularly when you look at Barnes going ahead of AD, even going ahead of Trey Young, going ahead of Booker and Mitchell. It's not for my taste. But I definitely see that upside. And yeah, Dynasty, 100% top 10 type of player.
Yeah, I think so too. For me, I probably would have drafted him at the highest in the second round. But yeah, I mean, it's a bold pick. He has that good usage next year just because the Raptors traded away all their stars.
Yeah.
But I still think it's slightly high.
It's a good point. They did trade
Yeah.
away the stars, and they've just opened it up for Scotty Barnes. Quickly's come in, RJ Barrett's come in, and they've sort of, I wouldn't say stolen the show, but they did take away a lot of that usage from Scotty Barnes that we had expected him to take on moving forward. Perhaps that'll come next season, but Scotty Barnes still has, particularly in category leagues, still has that value in other places as well. So it's not egregiously wrong. It is just a little high for my liking, but I like the boldness of the move there.
Oh, for sure. Let's see. I think I had I was
So your
second
next
round. I
pick,
took
yeah,
Kyrie.
you took Kyrie. Yep, that's
Yeah,
really good value at that point.
I
So
think
what's
so
that?
too. The only concern, though,
20 pick,
obviously, like the
pick
injury.
24. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, 24. But yeah, you know what? For all the options there, I think he was the best one available. He'll give you multiple categories too. The only concern is obviously injuries and then his off-court antics, which have kept him sidelined in previous seasons. But I mean, so far he's been pretty good with that, so that's good at
Yeah.
least. But
And who knows what's going to happen next season? If I would suspect that he still is playing alongside a Luka longer term, but you just don't know with this guy. He could end up on another team. But even alongside of a high usage guy like Luka, who's absolutely dominant, Kyrie's put up outstanding numbers whilst he's been on the court. Yeah, so I think that's a really good pick for him to slide down to pick 24.
oh
Like
yeah.
we were saying, is really, really nice. Any surprises in the second round for you?
Let's see. I think Maxi was a last pick of the second round. What do you think about that one? I think
I
it's
like it.
you like
I,
it?
I like it. Yep. I
Yeah?
think alongside of Embiid. He's the number 2 guy. He's put up close to first round value in a 12 teamer this season after the trade, of course, with Harden moving away. I think he's still got some upside. I think he's got the ability to get some more steals. His efficiency is fantastic. He's paired, so Raf has paired it with Wemby as well. So I think that's a nice pairing too.
Oh, definitely.
You think it's a bit too soon?
No, you know what? I would say, late second round, early third for me.
Yep.
Around there.
And in a 14 teamer, I think, so that's pick 28, which I think that's good. I think that's good for Tyrese Maxey. One that stood out for me was Paolo Banchero. So he went a little bit too early for me. I think points league, I could get behind that. But in a 9-cat situation, I don't think he's going to really ramp up his efficiency. And that's what's really killing his value. And at times, there's a lack of defensive stats, but he's actually boosted that quite recently, but it's really the efficiency that has let him down in terms of the category league.
Yeah, but you know what? Even in points leagues, I probably would have leaned more third round, probably around there.
Yeah, and again, it's a mock situation, so it's just really making bold statements, and analysts are saying, well, these are my guys, and I'm going to back them in, which is good. And I think that's what I've done in my most recent pick, and we'll go through that shortly. But Banchero in the second for me in a category league is far too early. Third round, you went with...
I went with Siakam. Yeah. I have a good feeling about him. I know, obviously, he's with the Pacers now. He's with a couple other stars. You got Miles Turner, Halliburton, but I think he's still going to give good value. Very promising pick. So I think I drafted him at about the right spot.
I think it's about the right spot. Obviously, your bias towards ex-Toronto players is there as well. So I completely get that. You've probably still got a bit of a love for him, which, I completely get behind. So, that's a fine pick for me. I think that's solid. In third round for me, I had Paul George. Again, there's that injury risk. He's getting older, but it's the per game value that I was looking at there, and I just couldn't pass him up at what turned out to be pick 41.
You know what? At that round and that stage, I think that's a good pickup.
Yeah, I think he's been close to first round value in a 9-cat situation this season. Of course, there's that risk that he does go down with injury. He is older. But I just couldn't pass it up at this stage. And the guy that came after, so Matt Smith took Kristaps Porzingis. So he's in a similar situation with games played or games missed as well. So I'm happy with the Paul George pick at pick 41.
And something interesting too, though, right before you, Jalen Johnson.
Well, hey, what a great pickup. And we said it all along. He needed to be rostered from pretty much day dot, but particularly early in the season. But getting him in the third round, I like it. We have talked about him as a clear top 50 guy for most of this season. So to be taken at that point in time, sure, it could be seen as a bit early, but it's aggressive on someone who has some upside.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. But like we've mentioned before, it's a very, very early draft, right? So that's also why.
Yeah. And maybe Kyle McEwen. So he may have some thoughts around what could happen as well with Trae Young and or DeJounte Murray. Do they split those guys up, removing a lot of usage, free up the usage for Jalen Johnson? It can be the sky's the limit for JJ moving forward. So, I understand the rationale behind that pick as well. So that's a really nice one too. Any others that stand out for you in that round? There's nothing really egregious, but what about LaMelo Ball?
I was just about to say that was totally understandable for me. I would probably draft him in the third round. I wouldn't take him higher than that.
Yeah, he was going close to the first round in a 12-teamer this season. And of course, more injury concerns, more shenanigans from the Hornets. I think going down to the third round is still good value. And we talk about that per game average value. I think that's going to pay off in spades. And if he can stay somewhat healthy, I think that's going to be a nice pick. But I think third, he may even drop to some fourth rounds in 12-teamers next season. But it would be interesting to see what the ADPs are come mock draft season. So that's going to be interesting to watch. Next round for me, coming around at pick, I guess that's pick 44 for me, is Jimmy Butler. Pick 44 for a guy that has perennially been a first or second rounder over the many, many years. Yes, the drop-off is bound to happen. We've seen it to a certain extent this season, But I think Jimmy Butler at pick 44, like I said, is good value there.
Oh yeah, I think that's pretty solid. And even we all know that he kind of heats up in the second half of the season. So if you're
Yeah.
trying to get a playoff spot, that's when you know that you can depend on him a lot more compared to earlier on in the season.
Absolutely. That's an interesting take that you've got there as well. If you're safely into the playoffs, if you grab a guy who's been a little bit disappointing earlier in the season, not getting the value that you expected, but all of a sudden come playoff time, they are smashing it. Does it make up for, and this, I listened to Josh Lloyd as well, does it make up for their somewhat lackluster season?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely
So
an interesting thing. I think in Jimmy Butler's case, it kind of does
I
to
think
an
so.
extent.
I
Yeah.
think so. And I think Josh Lloyd's example was Jordan Poole. So he was
Mm.
taken quite early in a lot of drafts this season. A lot of disappointment, a lot of people dropping him, but he's actually come good at the right end of the season. He's not blowing us away, but he's still providing close to top 50 value. So it doesn't make up for those really lackluster weeks, but it definitely helps a little bit come the business end of the season. Now, your next pick, take us through that one, DeMar
Yeah.
DeRozan.
For that one, DeRozan. I just think that it's very likely that Levine will be moved. And that's kind of what I was going off of. So it's a little bit speculative, of course. But I mean, if he is, that just opens up a lot more opportunities for DeRozan. But then again, obviously, it depends on DeRozan not being traded. And
Yeah.
we don't really know what's going to happen with that. But if he does
Yeah.
stick around, I think he would be a good pick.
Yeah, I think that's solid at that point of the draft.
Oh, yeah.
He's been really good since Levine's been out. He's been working alongside of Kobe White. And I'm just going to say it. It's another Toronto pick, isn't it? I see what's going on here, Kayla.
There might be a trend.
Okay. Any other surprises in that round? I see that Ja Morant went in the 4th round. So for a points league, all about that. Category league, I'm less so, but again, I can see the excitement around him returning and probably coming back with a chip on his shoulder.
I think so. Of course, there's also a little bit of injury concerns tied into that as well. LeBron James also went right after that too. I would say about 4th round at the most for LeBron, given his age.
Yeah, careful with the age thing. He's my age, but yeah, I get it.
He's
4th
young.
round.
He's young.
Yeah, he's very, very young. He's Sprite, but in the 4th round in a 14 team, I think that's good. Really good value there. I really like that. That's from our friend Matty G as well. So I really like that pick. I don't think it's going to be a huge drop off next season. He's still going to be a stud, and he's been fantastic per game, and he hasn't missed all that many games this season as well. And not to say that next season will be different or the same, but 4th round in a 14 team, I think that's pretty good value there.
Yeah, that's probably the highest that I would draft him.
Yeah. Next round, you have gone Brandon Ingram.
You know what? I think he was one of the better players who was available at that stage. He's been okay this season. He's been pretty good. Obviously, he'll give you a couple of performances here and there, but I still think that he has that value, that potential, especially with all the injuries that the Pelicans usually go throughout a season, well, including himself sometimes. But it just opens up some opportunities for him at different points in the season to perform a lot better.
Yeah, I'm now looking at your team construction. So Embiid, Kyrie, Siakam, DeRozan, Ingram. I think you've really solidified your points there. You got some really nice. You got some good threes. You may be a little bit off in terms of defensive stats. I think you may be okay there, but you really solidified your points. And we all know in category leagues, very difficult to find those points on the board later on in the draft. So I like the strategy because now you can start looking at some other categories like your steals, like your blocks. You're solid with rebounds, but you could boost that up later in the draft as well. So I like that strategy as well, Kayla. So very well done there. My next one, I went fairly safe, but I've gone Nick Claxton. Really needed to solidify my blocks. So I've got AD and Clacko. So that's really going to put me in good stead in terms of blocks, good field goal percentage. He's not going to absolutely destroy my free throws because it is poor free throws, but on low volume. So I'm happy with Nick Claxton, and I don't think they're going to look elsewhere. I don't think the Nets are going to look elsewhere for a center. He's still relatively young, so there is still room for improvement there. So I'm happy with that one. I did pick him just before DeAndre Ayton, and yes, I weighed up Ayton or Claxton at that point, but again, Ayton at the Trailblazers, I just don't really trust, and so I've just gone a little bit safer with Claxton there.
In that case, I would have done the exact same thing as you, because I saw I was planning my next pick. They obviously weren't going to fall to me where I'm drafting, but I would have considered definitely Claxton over Aiden. And Aiden is someone who I took in one of my points leagues, and he's been really good. But then again, there's that shutdown potential, of course.
Exactly right. Yeah, and there's big stretches of games where he has missed as well. And
yes,
we said that Jort Reith had some value, and not right now, but I think he's going to get some value moving forward. Now, you don't have a pick. I think your pick's coming up probably in the next few hours. We have 5 hours to pick, by the way, in this slow draft. And slow drafts, for those that have done slow drafts, can be very frustrating and very long. But the reason why slow drafts are actually beneficial in this situation is a lot of these analysts are all around the world. I'm in Australia. Kayla's in Toronto and Canada. We've got a few Australians. We've got Americans. It's a bit of a mixed bag. So I think this really suits what we're trying to achieve here. But I'm not trying to side skirt my next pick because I was hesitant. But the reason why I've gone Scoot Henderson so early, and yes, it is early, but it's the upside, it's the opportunity. He's been disappointing, and we know this about rookie guards. They are often disappointing in their rookie season. But I think come next year, they put a lot of faith into Scoot. And if it push came to shove and this was a real draft, I probably at this stage wouldn't have picked Scoot here, but I just wanted to make a statement call. This was me saying I've got a lot of faith and the Trailblazers have a lot of faith in Scoot. So I want to put my money where my mouth is and say I'm going to pick Scoot here. And I've sort of contradicted myself because I probably wouldn't put my money where my mouth is if it was a real money league. But you know what I'm saying. I'm thinking Scoot's going to have some nice upside come next year. We had some guys with other potential players as well. I see that Asar Thompson was taken right after me. Anthony Simons was taken just before my pick, and I probably would have taken Anthony Simons, but those two guys being teammates, I just think Scoot having that pedigree, number 2 draft pick, I think in terms of dynasty, I consider him a top 30 type of dynasty player as well. So I just see the upside. I just think next year he's going to have more of a consistent role. I think he's going to be playing a lot more minutes and hopefully the efficiency's there as well. So that's more a bold statement call, similar to what the guys were doing in the first couple of rounds, but I've waited until round 6 to make my first real surprise move.
Yeah, I have to say, I was surprised to see that you picked Scoot, but it's like you said, you're putting faith into your players, and this isn't a real draft right now, but it's just you showing that this is someone who has a lot of potential and that the Blazers are going to build off of. So, obviously he has struggled this season, but we've seen him starting to improve and get better, and he's only going to develop. So he has a lot of potential.
Yeah, and I think someone like Malcolm Brogdon won't be there as well, so that'll just open things up more for Scoot and probably for someone like Shaedon Sharpe as well. But yeah, that's a very bold, very early pick for me. I had other guys on the board, and some other potentials were, I think, CJ McCollum I was considering, but again, that was going to be a very boring play. Sometimes boring is good. Boring wins championships, but this is not a championship. This is a mock. Wanted to have a little bit of fun with it, but I needed to make that bold statement with Scoot Henderson because I think long term he's, like I said, top 30 type of dynasty prospect for me.
Yeah. Quickly also went pretty early too, 6th round, couple picks after.
Yeah. It's somewhat surprising, but I can see the upside there. He's going to have a really nice role in Toronto. So, I like it. I like that pick. Tyler Hero went just before him. Asar Thompson, again, huge upside. I'm somewhat surprised Amen hasn't been taken at this stage because I think Amen is the better player over Asar. But similar to the start of this season, people believed, and it looked likely at the start of the season that Asar had the greater runway to fantasy value.
Yes.
And I think it's going to be similar next season. So I can't see the Houston Rockets getting rid of the likes of Fred VanVleet. Şengün will hopefully have been fully mended at that stage come the start of the season. So Amen may find it tough in the early stages, but longer term, I think Amen is going to be a fantastic player, probably top 30 type of, maybe top 20 type of player long term. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. A lot to play out. So maybe in 3 days, 4 days time, this may come to a conclusion, depending on how
there's
quickly
10
we get to it.
rounds. We're in the 6th
10
right now,
rounds.
middle of the 6th. Yeah.
Okay, I reckon in the next couple of days it will come to its conclusion. So I think we'll come back together. We'll discuss our round picks and look how our teams look overall as well. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. So huge shout out to Adam King.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun doing this too. And just a quick note here: we still have Levine on the board, so I'm wondering. When
he was another
go.
one that I considered, but again,
I'm avoiding him.
I'm avoiding at this stage. I just don't know what's going to happen with him. Even on a per game basis, he wasn't that impressive this season. He was around that 70 mark. So I'm going to pick up a guy whose future is at the Bulls is a little bit contentious, yet his per game value wasn't even there in great spades this season either. So yeah, I've gone a little bit crazy, gone a little bit wacky, and gone scoot ahead of CJ McCollum, ahead of Zach LaVine, and a few others like that. But yeah, fun nonetheless.
Very fun. Very fun.
All right. Well, that takes us to the end of the show. That is a wrap. Do you have any final words?
Main thing is just to keep out an eye on the injuries. The injury bug has been brutal this season, so watch out for your players. Know who to drop. Also, look at our ads list and our streamers list to give you some ideas for that too, to help you win your playoffs.
Yep, and I've got our Twitter handles just down below. Obviously, you'll find Kayla at Kayla_Fonte. Please follow her if you don't already. She's putting a lot of post-game notes out, which is fantastic. It's wonderful for streaming purposes, but also just to review the day. If you don't have sufficient time in your day and your work life or whatever it may be to get to every single game, pretty much like the rest of us, follow her because she has fantastic notes as well.
Thank you.
Also, give myself a follow at NBA Fantasy Bible. Thank you, Kayla. And until next time, thank you, guys. See ya.
Bye.